the front lines of the confrontation between the United States and Iran have expanded to a scale few could have foreseen. In a move that has sent shockwaves through the region, Saudi Arabia has announced for the first time that it has officially joined the fighting alongside the United States. The Riyadh government has abandoned its long-held defensive posture and taken a direct role in joint airstrikes against Iranian-backed military targets. Behind this historic decision lies a single, unmistakable provocation. Iran crossed one of Saudi Arabia's most important red lines. The Tehran regime directly targeted Saudi Arabia from Iraqi territory on July 27th and 28th. At the center of those critical attacks was Abqaiq, the world's largest oil processing facility, the beating heart of Saudi Arabia's energy infrastructure and, by extension, a pillar of the global economy. For years, Saudi Arabia fought Iran's influence through proxies and intermediaries, arming and supporting rival factions across Yemen, Syria, and Iraq, while avoiding direct confrontation with Tehran itself. That era of shadow warfare is now over. By striking from Iraqi soil, using Iraqi-based militias as the instrument of attack, Iran calculated it could maintain plausible deniability while delivering a devastating blow. They miscalculated. The strikes on Abqaiq clarified, in a single flash of fire and smoke, that the kingdom would no longer treat attacks on its crown jewel infrastructure as a matter to be managed through back channels. This is not merely a bilateral escalation between Tehran and Riyadh. It is a tectonic realignment of the Middle East security architecture. Saudi Arabia's entry into direct joint military operations with the United States signals the collapse of the cautious hedging diplomacy that defined Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's earlier foreign policy, a period in which Riyadh courted both Washington and Beijing, signed agreements with Tehran brokered by China, and sought to keep every door open. That balancing act has been consumed by the reality of incoming missiles. The United States, for its part, has seized on this moment with striking speed. American defense officials confirmed that joint US-Saudi air operations began within hours of the Abqaiq attacks, targeting command and control nodes, weapons depots, and launch sites tied to Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and its network of aligned militias in Iraq and Syria. The message was unmistakable. An attack on Saudi Arabia's critical infrastructure would now be answered, not with sanctions, not with strongly worded statements, but with bombs. To understand the gravity of this shift, one must understand what Iran's proxy empire has cost the region over the past 2 decades. Through Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, Kataib Hezbollah and kindred groups in Iraq, and an array of militias in Syria, Tehran has built a ring of armed clients stretching from the Mediterranean to the Arabian Peninsula. This forward defense strategy was designed to keep adversaries far from Iran's borders, to bleed rivals slowly, and to give Iran leverage without ever admitting to a war. It allowed Tehran to strike enemies while denying responsibility, to negotiate from a position of manufactured strength, and to deter direct retaliation through the threat of wider escalation. Every attack attributed to a local militia bought Iran another month of ambiguity. Saudi Arabia's decision to join the fight alongside the United States shatters that logic. For the first time, a major regional power has answered a proxy strike, not by striking back at the proxy, but by joining a coalition aimed squarely at the network's sponsor and at the command structures that connect the proxies to Tehran. The distinction matters. Hitting a militia training camp is a pinprick. Dismantling the command and control web that links that camp to the IRGC is a campaign. Riyadh and Washington, together, have chosen the second course. The strategic consequences ripple outward in every direction. Inside Iraq, the government now faces an impossible squeeze. Its territory was used as a launchpad for attacks on Saudi Arabia, and the US-Saudi response is striking targets within Iraq's borders. Iraqi officials, long torn between their American security partner and their Iranian neighbor, now confront a situation where neutrality is no longer viable. Paramilitary groups aligned with Tehran have warned that direct US-Saudi operations on Iraqi soil will be treated as a declaration of war, a threat that risks drawing Iraq itself into a conflict its leadership desperately wants to avoid. In Yemen, the Houthis, Iran's most battle-hardened proxy, have promised retaliation for what they describe as an escalation against the resistance axis. Their arsenal of long-range drones and cruise missiles, refined over a decade of war, remains the most immediate means by which Iran can strike back without firing a shot from its own territory. Intelligence assessments suggest Houthi forces have been pre-positioning systems for months, precisely for a moment such as this. Israel, watching closely, sees in Saudi Arabia's decision a validation of its own long-held thesis, that the only effective answer to Iran's forward defense strategy is a coalition willing to strike the network, not just its edges. Quiet security coordination between Jerusalem and Riyadh, once unthinkable, has deepened in parallel with the military partnership with Washington. Officials familiar with the matter describe a growing convergence around a shared objective: to make the cost of Iran's proxy model exceed its benefits for the first time in a generation. For the global economy, the stakes are immediate and enormous. OSINT processes the majority of Saudi Arabia's crude exports. Any sustained disruption to its operations sends oil prices surging and rattles markets from Tokyo to Houston. The attacks on July 27th and 28th did not, by available reports, achieve the catastrophic disruption of 2019. But they came close enough to remind every importer on Earth how thin the margin is between stable energy markets and crisis. Insurance rates for Gulf shipping have spiked, tankers are rerouting, and contingency plans drafted during previous flare-ups have been quietly reactivated in foreign ministries and corporate boardrooms alike. Iran's leadership now faces a strategic dilemma it has spent years trying to avoid. The proxy strategy was built on the assumption that no adversary would risk the wider war that direct retaliation might trigger. Saudi Arabia, shielded by the American security umbrella and emboldened by the audacity of the OSINT strikes, has called that bluff. Tehran must now choose between escalating and risking a direct, state-on-state war. It has spent 4 decades avoiding or accepting a level of damage to its proxy network that could take years to repair. Neither option is cheap. Escalation invites the full weight of American air power, decades of Saudi military investment, and the possibility that Israel's threshold of involvement finally breaks into the open. De-escalation, meanwhile, signals to every militia in the network that Tehran will not protect them when the cost rises, a message that could corrode the loyalty that holds the proxy empire together. The events of late July may well be remembered as the moment the map of the Middle East was redrawn, not by a treaty or a summit, but by missiles launched from Iraqi soil and the joint thunder of US and Saudi aircraft answering them. For 20 years, Iran waged a war of 1,000 cuts, confident that no single cut would draw blood in return. That confidence died over OSINT. A new chapter has opened, and its central question is no longer whether Iran's proxies can strike with impunity. They have proven they cannot. But whether the coalition now forming against them can hold together long enough to make the change permanent. Crucially, this is not a war that either side sought, and that is what makes it so dangerous. Wars born of miscalculation, of bluffs called and assumptions upended, are the hardest to de-escalate, because neither side entered with a plan for how to stop. The calculations that kept the region in a tense, ugly peace for 2 decades have been broken, and nothing has yet risen to take their place. The world is watching, the region holds its breath, and the rules that have governed this conflict for 2 decades have, in the space of 2 days, been torn up and rewritten.